In the past 100 years or so, yoga has become increasingly known as a physical fitness routine practiced in places like gymnasiums. However, yoga has been traditionally known as the realization through direct experience of the pre-existing union between Atman and Brahman, Jivatman and Paramatman, and Shiva and Shakti, or the realization of Purusha standing alone as separate from Prakriti. To some people, the Bhagavad Gita is considered a religious text, a Bible of sorts. However, the Bhagavad Gita is actually 701 verses of a 100,000 verse epic poem entitled Mahabharata, estimated to be from the period of the 8th to the 9th centuries BCE. It is a story format containing the principles and practices of yoga for self-realization. The word yoga is specifically mentioned in 16 of the 18 chapters, a total of 87 verses, with the remainder of the 701 verses supporting or expanding on those 87 verses. Following are some examples of those verses which clearly demonstrate the focus of the Bhagavad Gita on yoga. Also included is commentary by Swami Rama on each of those verses. Bhagavad Gita, verses 239 to 240. The wisdom I have told you according to the philosophy of Sankhya. Now hear it according to yoga. The wisdom joined with which, O son of Pritha, you will abandon the bondage of karma. There is no loss of initiative on this path, nor is there any possibility of failure. Even a little of this discipline protects one from great danger and fear. Swami Rama. Sri Krishna has taught Arjuna the philosophy of Samkhya, which helps one to know that which is the self and to distinguish it from the non-self. Now he begins his teaching of yoga science. Samkhya philosophy teaches that the self of all is eternal and immortal, and that the world of objects is transitory and changeable. Samkhya is a philosophy, whereas yoga is the profound science of sadhana that applies to that philosophy. Sankhya and yoga go hand in hand. Without sadhana, philosophy remains mere speculation, and without philosophy, sadhana remains without a goal. When Sankhya and yoga are combined, one experiences the philosophical truths directly. They are no longer mere intellectual concepts. By practicing yoga, one can apply the philosophical truths of Sankhya in his daily life. The path of yoga teaches those disciplines of sadhana that help the aspirant in self-unfoldment. Yoga in action means well-disciplined and skillful action done in a non-attached way, without any expectation of the fruits of one's actions. Sri Krishna, the exemplary teacher of yoga science, explains how to develop equanimity and perform actions skillfully. Verse 248. Perform actions dwelling in yoga, abandoning attachment, O conqueror of wealth, being alike to success and failure. Equanimity is called yoga. Verse 48 further explains the way to do one's actions without creating conflict and suffering for oneself and for others. One should maintain equanimity within and harmony between himself and others. Evenness and tranquility are based on constant awareness of one's own essential nature, which is Satyam Shivam Sundaram, truth, happiness, and bliss. Unless one understands the fleeting nature of the pairs of opposites, pain and pleasure, sorrow and joy, through the help of profound and systematic sadhana, he cannot go beyond those experiences to attain a state of inner peace. According to Patanjali, the codifier of yoga science, the practical methods that are applied to attain perfect control of the mind and its modifications are called yoga. The yogi who has control of the mind and its modifications maintains a balance of mind and inner composure in all situations and under all conditions. Those who do not have control of their minds are lost, for they remain enslaved by the external environment and their reactions to it. Verses 249 to 250. Action is by far lower than the yoga of wisdom, O Arjuna. Seek to take refuge in wisdom. Those whose actions are causes of fruits are petty-minded. One endowed with wisdom relinquishes here both the good deeds as well as the bad ones. Therefore be directed toward yoga. Yoga is skillfulness in actions. After describing the negative effects of working for rewards, Sri Krishna explains the importance of performing disciplined action with non-attachment. The term buddhi yoga refers to action performed with a mental attitude of non-attachment to the fruits of one's action. Buddhi has the ability to discriminate between the real self and the non-self, and with such discrimination one can develop non-attachment to the non-self. A person with a dissipated mind is unable to comprehend the limitless joy that is experienced by the aspirant who is tranquil, performing his duties selflessly and skillfully. But when the mind is tranquil, pure reason, buddhi, is able to function. A tranquil mind alone has the capacity to maintain inner poise, which inspires and leads one to perform action skillfully and without attachment to the results. Such action becomes a means for fulfilling the purpose of life, whereas action performed with selfish desire bind one to the objects of the world. Actions done with non-attachment lead to complete freedom. Verse 253. When your intellect, previously confused by the variety of teachings, remains firm and unmoving in samadhi, then you will attain yoga. Swami Rama. When buddhi soars high, tearing the veils of delusion, one rises above all intellectual pursuits. The teachings that may be encountered from outside are already accessible through buddhi and are fully grasped. All knowledge is known to such a one, and he attains the highest state of yoga. Verses 260 and 261. Even though an intelligent man continues to endeavor, yet the turbulent senses forcibly draw his mind away. Therefore, controlling them all, joined in yoga, one should remain intent upon me. He whose senses are under control, his wisdom is established. Swami Rama. It is the inherent nature of the senses to contact the external world. The senses have tremendous power. Only those who know the technique of withdrawing the senses can realize how powerful they are. A little effort is not sufficient to attain withdrawal of the senses. Aspirants often think that by creating distance from the objects of the senses, by not enjoying the objects, the senses can be controlled. But that is not true. Eating food is a sensory experience, and if one does not eat for some time, the desire to eat becomes more intense, and the mind imagines food in many forms. By depriving the senses from experiencing their objects, the desire for enjoyment can actually increase rather than decrease. By fasting, one cannot get rid of the vasana, desire, to eat. It is only when the aspirant realizes the self and finds delight in it that he becomes free from the temptations and attractions created by the senses. But the aspirant cannot have a knowledge of Atman as long as the charms and temptations are in the mind. If one follows the nature of the senses and does not understand that the senses are the source of distraction, his mind will be completely dissipated. The sadhaka must make constant effort. Regular practice is important. Patanjali, the codifier of yoga science, states in the Yoga Sutras that the sadhaka should practice for a long time without any break and with full effort and profound faith. Otherwise, sadhana will not be fruitful. Steady-mindedness is possible only after one has controlled the senses. These verses remind the sadhaka that he should not be disappointed by the results of his sadhana if he fails once, twice, or even many times. Constant effort will help him to attain his goal. When his wants and desires are abandoned, then alone will he experience freedom. Bhagavad Gita, verse 266. There is no discriminating wisdom in one who is not joined in yoga, nor is there any cultivating of contemplativeness for one who is not joined in yoga. One who has not cultivated contemplation has no peace. How can there be happiness for one who is not at peace? Swami Rama. Pure reason is the essential means to discriminate the truth from the non-truth. That discrimination helps one to become non-attached to the objects of the world. When one resolutely practices sadhana, he attains the power of non-attachment, and when one is non-attached, he has full concentration. One who has full concentration attains a one-pointed mind and can utilize all of his human resources. He is able to experience peace, and peace brings happiness. That happiness is not the same as the pleasure received from the objects of sense gratification. Pleasure is a joy experienced through the senses, whereas happiness is an outcome of the state of tranquility. The human body is like a chariot in which the individual self is seated. Human intelligence is the charioteer, and the mind is the reins. The senses are the horses leading the chariot toward the objects of sensory enjoyment. The wise man who is able to make his mind tranquil stands firm and leads the chariot on the path of enlightenment, whereas the unwise lack the wisdom of yoga and are unable to control the senses. Untrained horses are unreliable, but trained horses lead the chariot on the path to enlightenment. Thus the wise man learns to master the senses. He attains freedom, but he who is unwise and uncontrolled is trapped by the snares of births and deaths. Verses 4:1 to 4:3. I taught this immutable yoga to Vivasvat. Vivasvat taught it to Manu. Manu taught it to Ikshvaku. Royal sages knew this yoga as it was handed down in the lineage of the tradition. Then, over a long period of time, this yoga disappeared, O scorcher of enemies. That very ancient yoga I have taught you today, as you are my devotee as well as my friend. This is the highest secret. Yoga science is as eternal as human existence. This noble tradition is a perennial stream of knowledge that flows from eternity to eternity. It is knowledge that is not subject to destruction. Such knowledge remains ever young and ever fresh in all conditions. That is why the message of the Bhagavad Gita is called the perennial song. This song carries the all-encompassing and profound knowledge of the individual and the universe, of the world within and without. Knowledge was never born and therefore never dies. It is not possessed by anyone, for it is always there in all times, past, present, and future, for all seekers. Verse 4:18. He who sees inaction in action, and who sees action in inaction, he is the one endowed with wisdom among human beings. He is joined in yoga, a performer of complete action. One who has disciplined himself, trained his senses, and attained a concentrated state of mind, that always seeks the counsel of Buddhi, does not commit mistakes in performing his actions. He surrenders the fruits of his actions willingly for the sake of others. Such selfless action has two benefits. The fruits of one's actions do not bind him, and his action becomes a form of worship, meditation in action. The yogi goes on performing actions with a tranquil mind and always remains free from the bondage of action. For him there is no self-interest. All his actions are motivated by selflessness, and he is free. Verse 438. There is no purifier in this world equal to knowledge. One who is fully accomplished in yoga finds that knowledge in the self in due time. Among all branches of knowledge, the highest is spiritual knowledge, which is attained by the systematic method of the inward journey. The purest of all knowledge is the knowledge of Atman, the center of consciousness, which completely quenches the thirst for knowing the truth. When the sadhaka has firm faith in the inner dweller, Atman, and when he trusts his teacher and understands the scriptures and teachings of the great ones who have already trodden the path of light, then he is capable of performing his duties without committing any error. He does not waste his time uselessly brooding on concerns that dissipate the mind. Such knowledge purifies the way to the center of consciousness. Firm faith, a one-pointed mind, control of the senses, non-attachment, and regular sadhana are important means for seeing oneself in all and all in oneself. Nothing is higher and purer than the knowledge of Atman. Such knowledge gives one perfect peace. Then all doubts are resolved. Verses 441 to 42. He who has renounced actions through yoga, he whose doubts have been sundered by knowledge, he who has cultivated the self, him the actions do not bind, O conqueror of wealth. Therefore, with the sword of the knowledge of self, cut this doubt that is born of ignorance and that is dwelling in your heart. Resort to yoga. Rise, O descendant of Bharata. Swami Rama. In these verses, the word yoga has been used in the sense of actions performed skillfully, with full mastery for the sake of loka sangra, actions done only for the sake of others. Such actions do not bind the yogi. Action does not enslave anyone. That which has enslaving power is the desire to receive the fruits of one's actions. Desire is the cause of enslavement, but for those who have attained the knowledge of Atman, desires have no existence, so they are free even though they act. Verses 5:4 and 5:5. Only the childish argue about Samkhya and Yoga as being separate, not so the Pandits. Resorting to either one properly, one attains the fruit of both. The place that is attained by the followers of Samkhya is also attained by those of Yoga. He who sees Samkhya and Yoga as one truly sees. Swami Rama. The great learned ones who understand both the path of Sankhya Yoga, the path of knowledge, and Karma Yoga, the path of action, do not find a huge gulf between these two paths, for they know them to be two aspects of the same pursuit. How can one possibly perform actions without knowledge, and how can the fire of knowledge be kindled without action? Behind the yoga of action stands the profound philosophy of Samkhya, and the science of yoga furnishes the means to practice the goal of life. Thus they are inseparable. Both paths lead the aspirant to the spiritual summit. Learning to perform actions is beneficial for the ordinary person, but for one who is free from the pairs of opposites, it is immaterial whether he follows the path of renunciation or the path of action. To one who has attained the state of tranquility, it makes no difference which path he follows. Therefore, the conflict over following one path or the other does not arise in the mind of the learned. Both paths lead to the same end: liberation, emancipation, fulfillment, and self-realization. Verse 5:21. The happiness that he finds in the self, whose self is unattached to external contacts, he with his self joined in the yoga of Brahman, attains imperishable comfort. Those who have intense thirst for knowledge cannot quench that thirst with the waters of streams and wells. Only the knowledge of the eternal quenches it. When, in a systematic manner, the aspirant practices inwardness, he learns to stop the outward flow, to experience the joy of the eternal. He is constantly aware of that joy. Through yogic sadhana, the yogi is able to reach a state of equilibrium, evenness, and tranquility. For him, external pleasures do not have value, and he does not search for happiness in the external world. He knows that the source of happiness is within. He constantly remains aware of this truth, undisturbed and united with the eternal. Verse 6.2. That which is called renunciation, you should know that to be yoga, O Pandava. No one who has not renounced desires can be a yogi. Swami Rama. In the path of renunciation, renouncing the fruits of actions comes later. First comes tyaga, literally abandoning all of one's personal possessions. Three main desires, called three ashanas, are renounced: the desire for a spouse and children, for wealth, and for name and fame. Along with this, the practice of non-attachment, vairagya, is also strengthened, without which renunciation cannot be accomplished. It is said that a bird having two wings, tyaga and vairagya, is able to soar from this shore of life to the shore of eternity. This path is for the fortunate few and not for the ordinary masses. It is called sannyasa yoga or jnana yoga. The other path is the path of action. In that path one can have a wife, children, a home, and other means for living in the world, but non-attachment is strictly followed. In the path of action, there is an important question to be considered. Is it possible for the yogis who follow the path of action to perform actions in such a way that they do not create barriers and obstacles? Can action become the means of liberation and lead one to self-realization, the goal of human life? There are two main responses. First, good actions performed selflessly and with the fruits given as offerings to the Lord, who is in everyone, have no binding power. Selfless service is important. Second, good actions also bring good fruits, and those fruits can be utilized merely to enable one to live in the world so that he can discharge his duties effectively. No matter which path one follows, he has to do actions. He cannot live without acting. Therefore, it is important to understand the nature of an action before one performs that action, whether he is doing sattvic action with self-mastery or is being controlled by rajasic or tamasic qualities and acting as a slave to those qualities. Sattvic actions alone lead one to the state of tranquility. Sattvic actions performed without the desire for fruits are considered to be liberating actions. All other actions bind the human being. Yogis who wish to attain the state of tranquility do their actions and duties selflessly and skillfully. They have all the necessary objects of the world, but use them just for the sake of doing their duties. In practicality, the real yogis and sannyasins are one and the same. On both the paths of action and renunciation, the key point is renouncing the fruits of actions. Those who have renounced the path of action and still lust for the fruits of action are not true renunciates. In the path of renunciation, no external sacred fire is lit, and no sacrifice is offered to the fire. Rather, the renunciates light the fire of knowledge and burn their samskaras. The path of renunciation is also referred to as yoga, for in the path of renunciation, anything and everything is renounced, but not the purpose, which is union of the individual self and the self of all. That union is attained by the renunciate through meditation and contemplation. In the path of action, one can attain that union by giving up all the fruits of actions and remaining completely non-attached. Verses 6:3 to 6:4. For a meditator, muni, desirous of ascending in yoga, action is said to be a superior means, and when the same one has already risen in yoga, tranquility becomes his support. When he is no longer drawn to the objects of senses nor to actions, having renounced all volitions of desire, he is then called one who has ascended to yoga. A muni is one who practices mauna, silence, in order to attain perfect silence. When the muni makes efforts to achieve profound control over the mind, action, and speech, and maintains perfect silence, he attains the state of tranquility. Until one experiences perfect silence, he is not aware of the profound difference between leading a life in the external world and treading the path of the inward journey. The systematic method that leads one to the deepest state of silence is called meditation. Sleep is very necessary for all creatures of the world in order to have physical and mental rest. But the rest acquired through meditation is far superior to the rest given by sleep. There is a difference between sleep and the deep state of silence. The ignorant person sleeps every day and comes out of sleep no less ignorant because sleep offers only rest. But if one learns to go to a deep state of meditation, he is rested, and at the same time his whole personality is transformed. That transformation cannot be attained without the inward method of meditation. Through meditation, the mind attains a state of tranquility. Verses 6:8 and 6:9. His self, satiated by knowledge and realization, absolute, having conquered the senses, joined in yoga, he is called a yogi, beholding a lump of clay, stone, or a nugget of gold alike. One who is firmly established in the constant awareness of Atman, the pure self, is aware of the limited value of the mundane world, its objects and sense pleasures. He is no longer enticed by the pairs of opposites. For him, a piece of rock and a heap of gold are alike. Such a yogi has attained perfection. It does not matter to a sage whether anyone knows him or not, follows him or not. Only the prepared ones can understand the height of his realization and can be benefited. Verses 6:10 to 6:15. The yogi should incessantly place himself in yoga, dwelling in solitude, alone, his mind and self controlled, having no expectations, receiving no input into the senses. There, making the mind one-pointed with the mind, self, and movement under control, sitting on the seat, one should practice yoga for self-purification. With the pacified self, with all fear banished, remaining in the vow of a celibate, controlling the mind, with the mind absorbed in me, one should dwell joined in yoga and intent upon me. Thus uniting himself in yoga, the yogi with a well-directed mind reaches that peace, the ultimate of which is absorption, nirvana, and the foundation of which is me. Swami Rama. Knowledge received from sources other than the self no doubt helps and inspires the sadhaka, but without direct knowledge and experience of the self, the thirst for knowledge and attainment remains unquenched. When the sadhaka learns to light the fire of knowledge, he begins treading the path of purification. He thereby attains a state in which all his samskaras are burned and he is purified. When we say that everyone needs to be purified, it means that the mind ordinarily functions like a slave to one's samskaras and past habits. Then the mind is not functioning as an instrument of the self. A profound, precise, and practical method of controlling the mind and its modifications is necessary. When one develops a strong desire to know truth and realizes his helplessness, he has no alternative but to follow the path of sadhana, the path of inner experience, the path of light and delight. A yogi is he whose purpose of life is to unite himself with the absolute truth. The term yogi is used both for those who are making sincere efforts and practicing a state of samahita, samadhi, and those who have already attained samahita. The path they follow is called yoga sadhana. Verses 6:16 and 6:17. There is no yoga for one who eats much or who eats nothing at all, or for one who is inclined to excessive sleep, or one who awakes altogether, O Arjuna. He whose food and enjoyment are balanced, whose movements and actions are balanced, whose sleeping and waking are balanced, his yoga becomes the eliminator of sorrows. Many students fallaciously think that rigid austerities should be practiced on the path of yoga. Some inexperienced aspirants go on fasts for a long time because they think that physical mortification can help to purify both body and mind. It should be clear that except during a period of cleansing in which one practices kriyas such as the internal wash, the upper wash, the lower wash, and the complete wash, fasting is not recommended. Too much fasting affects one's resistance, and he may become a victim of disease. Yoga is a middle path. In yoga sadhana, one should not touch the extremes, overeating or fasting, oversleeping or not sleeping enough. Yogic practices lead one to become sensitive to the effects of overindulgence and austerities that are too severe. One is then able to find a natural balance in all areas of his life. Through sadhana, one learns to regulate all aspects of his functioning and to gain mastery over the body, senses, and mind. He keeps the body free from disease and weakness, and he keeps the mind free from disturbance. Verses 6:18 to 6:20. When a very well-controlled mind remains stable in the self alone, detached from all desires, then one is called joined in yoga. As a lamp in a place without breeze does not tremble, this is the simile of a yogi whose mind is controlled, practicing the yoga of the self. Where the mind ceases, withdrawn through the observance of yoga, where one sees the self in the self, one is satiated in the self. Swami Rama. Concentration and meditation should ultimately lead one to Atman alone. One-pointedness of mind is an important requisite to help one accomplish that. When one learns to concentrate on the breath and removes all the defects that he finds in his breathing patterns, he tries to understand who it is that is inhaling and exhaling. There are traditions that believe in coordination of mantra with breath at this stage. Mantra is a Sanskrit word, sound, syllable, or set of words. It is a means to remove all the impurities of mind. There are a few mantras that are used while inhaling and exhaling that do not disturb the flow of the breath. The sadhaka reaches a point in his practice where he not only breathes the air, but constantly remembers the mantra with each inhalation and exhalation. That leads the mind to constant awareness of the mantra. When the consciousness of the mantra is deepened, the mantra is able to guide the mind in the inner world. The student is then taught to be aware of the inner light that already burns without flickering. When the mind experiences that light, it elevates itself to a state of joy that it did not experience before. That light which is within is the finest and best form upon which to meditate. Without that light, we would not be able to see, observe, verify, and discriminate anything in the external world. It is the light of consciousness that is experienced in concentrated form. The mind then begins to see clearly. It is no longer clouded. Then the light of consciousness and mantra become one, because at that stage the mantra is not actually remembered, but its meaning and feeling are revealed. At first one remembers and repeats the mantra in a gross way, but gradually it is experienced in a more subtle way. When one develops the feeling of constant awareness of the mantra, it unites with the mainstream of consciousness, where light and sound are inseparably mingled. That is a perfect state of concentration. One has then attained profound control of the mind, and he experiences a constant closeness and union with the self-illumined Atman. Verses 628 and 629. Thus, uniting the self in yoga, the yogi, free of all stains, easily enjoys the ultimate happiness, which is contact with Brahman. One whose self is joined in yoga, looking evenly at everything, sees the self dwelling in all beings and all beings in the self. The self-realized yogi sees the eternal, omnipresent, omniscient, pure self everywhere. He sees himself in all and all in himself. He realizes that the self, the Lord of life, is in all beings and all are in the Lord. He knows that he cannot be separated from the universal consciousness, for he is one with it and is virtually that universal consciousness. Such a yogi's mind dwells in the state of evenness. For him, pain and joy are the same, yet he remains sensitive to the pain and misery of others. He is aware of that which causes misery and also that which brings worldly pleasure. His yoga practices and the attainment of a deep meditative state do not lead him to the black hole of nothingness, but enable him to sympathize, love, help, and serve, yet to remain in a state of tranquility. He is gifted with the special quality of knowledge through which he feels pain for those who suffer as though it were his own suffering. Such is the state of a yogi who is endowed with the great gift of sensitivity and yet is able to maintain evenness at the same time. He has the capacity to feel the misery of others, but is not affected by it. He has learned the profound art of living and being. He lives in the world, but is not of it. The yogi maintains his individuality, yet is always fully conscious of Atman. Being one with the eternal, he is free from destructibility, even though the objects of the world are ever changing and subject to destruction. Such a yogi releases himself from the conditionings created by the three gunas and from the limitations of time, space, and causation. The entire chain of life, from the unknown to the known, and the known to the unknown, from birth to death and death to the hereafter, is unveiled to him and reveals its secret. He is the knower of all events, yet he is free from the changes he experiences. Such a great one is like a tank that is overflowing with water. The tank maintains its individuality even though the same water is both within and without and all around. The perennial flow of knowledge fills the yogi and keeps him overflowing. He is constantly aware of his eternal existence, but he still maintains his higher ego for the sake of serving others rather than for maintaining his individuality. He is firmly established in uninterrupted consciousness of the Absolute. Verse 636. Krishna said, Yoga is difficult to be found by someone whose self is not in control. This is my view. But by someone who endeavors with a controlled self, it can be attained by appropriate methods. Swami Rama, the purpose of yoga sadhana is to understand the mind and its modifications, the way the mind functions in both the external and internal worlds, and to develop control over this mind. Self-control is that state in which one is not swayed by selfish desires or by the sense of pleasures that are responsible for creating injurious ties of attachment. Attaining self-control is truly a difficult task. Hearing Arjuna's uncertainty, Sri Krishna replies, O Arjuna, no doubt the mind is dissipated and difficult to control. But when the sadhaka consistently makes sincere effort to isolate mind from the objects of enjoyment and attachment, he can attain control of it. Vairagya, non-attachment, is an important means to attain control of the mind. It should be understood and practiced. Verse 7.1. Yoga is difficult to be found by someone whose self is not in control. This is my view. But by someone who endeavors with a controlled self, it can be attained by appropriate methods. In the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, Sri Krishna often uses the word me for the real and pure self. This might confuse and bewilder the modern student. One should not forget that Sri Krishna is a perfect enlightened incarnation and therefore is correct in using the words I and me to refer to the divinity rather than using the third person. That is a direct way of relating to the dearest disciples. Modern teachers become carried away and think that they too can talk in this way, but when they do, it is usually because of their egotism. In fact, they have not attained a state of perfection but are trying to show off, which is very misleading to the student. The student should be aware that a true teacher is completely selfless and loving. When a modern teacher asks his students to dedicate their time, money, and energy and all that they have to him, his teaching is enveloped in egotism and selfishness. Jnana and Vijnana are two kinds of knowledge that we find in the scriptures. Jnana is knowledge of the Absolute. Vijnana is the knowledge for devising the perfect method of sadhana. When one attains these two aspects of knowledge, he can tread the path and attain perfection. In the state of perfection, the aspirant attains the highest goal that an individual is capable of achieving. The last step is total expansion of the knowledge that he has attained. He becomes one with the whole. Verses 7:16 and 7:17. 4 kinds of people, performers of good deeds, devote themselves to me, O Arjuna. The distressed, the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of fulfillment of a wish, and the one who knows. Of these, the one endowed with knowledge, ever united in yoga, with single-pointed devotion, is distinguished. I am most beloved of the one endowed with wisdom, and he is also my beloved. There are 4 categories of people who are devoted to the Lord. In the first category are those who are needy and in distress, who suffer mentally and physically. They are not successful in attaining wealth in the temporal world, and they are miserable and suffer from all kinds of diseases. That type of person worships God to fulfill his mundane desires and has no knowledge of the nature of the self. The next category of worshippers seek knowledge with the desire to know the mystery of human relationships, of life, and of the universe. That person's devotion to the Lord does not arise out of misery or failure experienced in the external world, but out of the desire to know the highest truth. To satisfy his intellectual curiosity, he pursues the path of enlightenment. If he pursues it for a long time and learns to unfold himself to a point where pure reason functions, he becomes able to discriminate between the mundane and the absolute. In the third category are those aspirants who have sharpened their faculty of discrimination and know the difference between the pure self and the not self, the imperishable and the perishable. Such an aspirant makes sincere efforts to realize the highest. He searches for a competent teacher and follows the path to enlightenment that is imparted to him. With the help of meditation, he directs his energies only toward realizing the self. He proves to be the highest of all seekers. His devotion does not arise out of worldly distress, anxiety, or intellectual curiosity. In his search for truth, there lies a purity of heart and mind. The fourth class is composed of those fortunate ones who have already attained wisdom. Such an aspirant has realized the real self, so for him nothing remains to be attained. Verse 7:25. I am not vivid to all, veiled by the Yoga Maya. This deluded world does not know me, who am unborn and immutable. Swami Rama. Contemplation and meditation on external pleasure leads one to further destruction, but the aspirant who is conscious of the ultimate reality meditates and contemplates only on the highest of truth. Many aspirants do not understand the distinction between the manifest and the unmanifest one. The word avyakta means unknown, unseen, imperceptible. Vyakta, however, may be perceived with the help of the sense organs. The sadhaka attempts to go beyond vyakta to attain knowledge of avyakta, but the ignorant have no power to go beyond the mire of delusion created by the senses. Instead of meditation on one individual aspect of the universe, the wise meditate on the supreme fountainhead of life and light from which proceeds the whole universe. There are two schools of meditation. One believes in meditation on the forms, the other on the formless. But since ordinary minds cannot comprehend meditation on the formless, a form is used for them in the primary stage of meditation to help them attain concentration of mind. Ultimately, meditation should go to a deeper level that is beyond forms and names. Verse 7:30. They who know me with reference to the beings, with reference to the deities, as well as with reference to sacrificial observances, even at the time of their departure, their minds are united in yoga, and they know me. Perfection can be attained by performing actions skillfully and with full devotion. When a one-pointed mind has been achieved and all the energies are directed toward self-realization, all action becomes a form of worship. Then the aspirant identifies himself with his essential nature, which is truth, happiness, and bliss. He knows that the worshipped one and the worshipper are one and the same. All the qualities of the ocean are found in a single drop of water. Qualitatively, they are one and the same. Realizing that truth, the aspirant fulfills the purpose of his life and becomes perfect. He is no longer affected by the pairs of opposites. Verses 8:12-13. Closing all the doors of the body and retaining the mind in the heart, placing the prana in the crown of the head, established in the concentration of yoga, Om. This is Brahman, consisting of a single indestructible syllable. He who, enunciating it and contemplating it, goes forth, abandoning his body, he reaches the supreme state. Breath and mind are interdependent and are in the habit of reacting simultaneously. When the breath is calm and serene, the mind attains a state of joy. The aspirant should focus his mind at the space between the two eyebrows and should learn to visualize the light of life through which one sees, senses, and knows. When his meditation is strengthened, the one light becomes more and more clear, and he finally reaches the source of light and life. The yogi who regularly practices meditation for a long time without interruption in his practice attains that state. The yogi who learns to meditate by applying sushumna and incorporating the sacred syllable Om can attain a state of equilibrium. It is interesting to note that not all mantras can be adjusted to the inhalation and exhalation process. Om is a smooth sound and does not create jerks or irregular rhythms in the breath. Yogis remember that sound all the time. Verse 827. Knowing these two paths, no yogi is ever confused. Therefore, O Arjuna, be united in yoga in all times. Swami Rama. One who has knowledge of both paths, the path of light and the path of darkness, of good and evil, is never deluded by the darkness, by ignorance, for he knows the consequences of both paths. Such a yogi is never trapped by the charms, temptations, and allurements of the external world. Every moment of his life is devoted to the path of yoga. He never abandons the practices of yoga, so there is no chance of his downfall. He follows the path of yoga with full faith and a one-pointed mind. Yoga is an art and a science that means skill in action, equanimity with regard to pleasure and pain, and freedom from attachment to mundane enjoyments. One who follows yoga is never deluded. Verse 934. Let your mind be fixed on me, my devotees, sacrifice unto me, bow unto me, intent on me, thus joining yourself in yoga, you will come only to me. One who has knowledge of both paths, the path of light and the path of darkness, of good and evil, is never deluded by the darkness, by ignorance, for he knows the consequences of both paths. Such a yogi is never trapped by the charms, temptations, and allurements of the external world. Every moment of his life is devoted to the path of yoga. He never abandons the practices of yoga, so there is no chance of his downfall. He follows the path of yoga with full faith and a one-pointed mind. Yoga is an art and science that means skill in action, equanimity with regard to pleasure and pain, and freedom from attachment to mundane enjoyments. One who follows yoga is never deluded. Verses 11:7 and 11:8. Today see the entire world with everything animate and inanimate, here dwelling in one, in my body, O Master of Sleep, and whatever else you wish to see. However, you cannot see me merely with this eye of your own. I give you a divine eye. See my lordly yoga. When the mind is led beyond the concepts and conditionings of time, space, and causation, it can fathom the unfathomable and attain a state of timelessness and infinity. The yogi can open his own divine eye when he is able to bring his consciousness to the summit of the here and now. Mind is in the habit of either brooding on the past or imagining the future. It has no experience of the present. During meditation, the mind is focused on the now, and thus is capable of having a vision of past, present, and future simultaneously. Verses 12:1 and 12:2. Those devotees ever joined in yoga who worship you thus, and those who worship the unmanifest manifest indestructible syllable, among them which are the highest masters of yoga. Those who ever joined in yoga, entering their mind into me, worship me, endowed with the highest faith, I believe them to be the most united in yoga. Swami Rama, most people cannot fathom the idea of meditation on the Absolute, which is formless and attributeless. Only a fortunate few are able to attain that highest state of realization. The path of bhakti, devotion, is considered to be superior for those who are unable to realize the pure self. It is difficult to conceive of meditating without a form or object on which to focus the mind. Sri Krishna, therefore, advises Arjuna to have a concrete form for the concentration of mind, and he teaches Arjuna to worship the manifest form of the Lord with firm faith. The aspirant cannot concentrate his mind if he has no faith in his heart and if he mechanically practices the technique of concentration. Whether one follows the path of bhakti or the path of jhana, self-realization, a one-pointed mind is important, and that cannot be achieved without concentration. Concentration of mind and faith are essentials for treading either path. The ordinary sadhaka or aspirant should have a concrete form for concentration and meditation before his mind is prepared for the higher realms. If an object is chosen for concentration but the meditator does not appreciate its qualities, the mind cannot concentrate on that object. The object chosen for meditation should have qualities that enable the meditator to respond to it. Any manifest form of the Lord possessed of excellence that suits the aspirant can be used as the object of concentration. Any aspect of manifestation that can be concentrated upon with firm faith is helpful to the devotee. One who fully devotes his life to worshiping and concentrating on any aspect of manifestation with unshaken faith can attain perfection. Verses 12:9 to 12:11. Now, if you cannot harmonize a stilled mind in me, then desire to find me through the yoga of practice, O Arjuna. If you are not even capable of practicing, then become intent on my acts. Even performing actions for my sake, you will gain fulfillment. Now, if you are unable to do even this, then resorting to my yoga, do renounce the fruits of all actions with your mind and self under control. Swami Rama, it should be understood that Arjuna is not only speaking for himself, but represents all seekers, and that Sri Krishna answers Arjuna's questions for all aspirants. Sri Krishna says to Arjuna, if you cannot concentrate your mind on the form or on the formless Brahman, if you are not able to practice the worship of Saguna or the path of Nirguna, if you are not able to concentrate on me, you can practice Abhyasa, the path of performing actions for the Lord only. Even for the aspirant who cannot concentrate, meditate, or contemplate, there is a way to attain spirituality. Abhyasa means practicing, repeating the same method again and again until the goal is attained. In the path of spirituality, the student may find himself incapable of attending to his sadhana regularly and punctually. For lack of discipline and orderliness, the aspirant may slip back to his old habit patterns. In such cases, he should not abandon the path of spirituality, but should again make sincere efforts and practice his sadhana and make it a regular routine. Abhyasa should be done in an unbroken way. Steady practice is needed. If the aspirant thinks that practicing sadhana for some time and then abandoning it for a while will help him, he is wrong. One must make sincere and constant effort, regularly and punctually, toward the goal. Verses 13:11 to 12. undeviating devotion toward me with single-minded yoga, fondness for solitary places, not delighting in gatherings of people, always dwelling in spiritual knowledge, insight into the meaning of true nature, this is said to be knowledge. Other than this is ignorance. Swami Rama, to merely know something intellectually is not to have profound knowledge of it. We all know what to do and what not to do, but we do not know how to actualize that knowledge. Each of us understands certain fundamental truths about how to live, yet we do not know how to put them into practice. It is important to understand those truths from a practical viewpoint. In childhood, one is instructed in all the fundamentals, to be good, nice, kind, and gentle. Yet he is not taught how to bring them into practice. Practicing truth is different from learning to know truth. Pride, conceit, and thoughts of hurting and injuring others are characteristics of the ignorant. Kindness, gentleness, love, forgiveness, straightforwardness, service to one's elders and preceptors, and the steady practice of spirituality are the virtues and characteristics of the wise aspirant. If those qualities are lacking, one remains ignorant. All the virtues and weaknesses should be understood, and the virtues should be cultivated with all sincerity and firmness of will. Verses 14, 26, and 27. And he who serves me with an undeviated yoga of devotion, fully transcending the gunas, he is fit to become Brahman. I am the fundament of the immortal and immutable Brahman, of eternal law, Dharma, and of ultimate happiness. Swami Rama, to cross the mire of delusion created by the three gunas, the aspirant needs to have one-pointed devotion and complete dedication to the Supreme Lord alone. Without purification of mind, single-minded devotion is not possible, and without single-minded devotion, one is not able to attain the highest Brahman. The Supreme Lord is the final abode. He is immortal and imperishable. He plans the eternal laws of Dharma. He is full peace and bliss. Verses 16:1 to 16:3. Fearlessness, purity of mind, stability in the yoga of knowledge, charity, controlled, sacrificial observance, self-study, asceticism, and simplicity, nonviolence, truth, non-anger, selflessness, peace, and non-gossiping, kindness toward all beings, non-greediness, mildness, modesty, non-fickleness, brilliance of confidence, forgiveness, sustenance, purity, non-animosity, not seeking of honor. These appear in one who is high-born in divine wealth, O descendant of Bharata. Swami Rama, it is important to cultivate the qualities that make one's path easy and smooth. Without certain qualities, the stumbling blocks, obstacles, and barriers cannot be removed. For some, the path is clear, but for others, it is full of obstructions. Those who are endowed with good qualities find their path to be easy, whereas those who do not cultivate good qualities constantly create difficulties for themselves. All follow one and the same path, to the light of lights, but each person creates his own problems, confrontations, and obstacles along the way. Every human being is endowed with strength that needs to be understood and applied before he prepares himself for the voyage to the unknown. Among all qualities, fearlessness is the first and foremost. Purity of heart is another quality. Consistency in pursuing the knowledge that helps the aspirant in the inward journey is another virtue that needs to be cultivated. These qualities lead the aspirant to generosity and the attainment of self-control. They help him learn to give and to study his spiritual progress and the teachings of the sages. The practice of austerity and straightforwardness is also essential in preparing to tread the path. Verse 17:17. Those three kinds of asceticism undertaken by humans with supreme faith when they are not desiring the fruit and are joined in yoga are said to be the sattvic ones. The student should learn the distinction between external and internal austerities. In physical or external austerities, one should learn not to do that which is not to be done and to speak the way he thinks, understands, and knows. Mental austerity is also very important. When one practices mental austerity, he maintains serenity and silence and remains vigilant toward his thinking process. He avoids entertaining those thoughts that are disturbing and dissipating. Both mental and physical austerities purify the aspirant and make him fit to follow the path of spirituality. These are called sattvic austerities. When the student purifies his mind, action, and speech with the help of sattvic strength, he attains the higher realms of life. Verse 18:33. That undeviating steadfastness, driti, which sustains activities of mind, prana, and senses through yoga is, O Prita, a sattvic one. In addition to intelligence and knowledge, driti, firmness or steadiness, is necessary in the path to infinity. There are aspirants who have knowledge, who know what to do and what not to do, but who lack the inner strength to be steady and firm in doing their practices. Some aspirants are very steady and firm but do not have profound knowledge of spirituality. In the path to self-realization, sattvic buddhi and sattvic firmness are equally important. The way it is used here, the word driti, has a meaning more profound than that which is usually attributed to it. It is that inner strength which does not dawn all of a sudden, but which is attained only after long spiritual practice under the guidance of an accomplished yogi. Human effort, sincerity, and honesty lead the aspirant to attain that power. For lack of that power, the yogi cannot reach the highest realm of spiritual knowledge. Driti enables one to have a one-pointed mind, and it helps one maintain coordination between the mind and the vital breath and pranic energy. It is a method of applying sushumna, which is important for attaining spiritual knowledge and a state of tranquility, for all inner and external distractions are controlled by sushumna application. Those who systematically learn the method of meditation know that after attaining physical stillness and steadiness, irregularity of the breath continues to disturb the mind. Mental unrest can also disrupt the breath. Breath and mind are two inseparable friends who work together until the last breath of life. The state in which both mind and breath function in a balanced way is established by driti. Driti is that which brings mind and breath to a state of balance. It is the power that helps them to work together in a serene way. Firmness or determination is of three kinds: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. It is sattvic when it is able to direct the power of mind, senses, and breath to bring about balance, and when the mind and breath mutually help one another in a coordinated way. It is sattvic when used for spiritual attainment and selfless actions. When used for selfish desire and self-enjoyment, it is rajasic. Rajas endowed driti prompts one to perform actions or religious acts with a desire to enjoy the fruits of those actions. Tamasic driti produces excessive and long hours of sleep with numerous and disturbing dreams. It also creates fears, makes one timid and sorrowful, and leads one to cry without valid reason. It makes one arrogant and self-conceited. The firmness of tamasic people is expressed in obstinacy and conceit. Verse 1857. renouncing all acts to me with the mind intent upon me, resorting to the yoga of wisdom, always hold your mind in me. Swami Rama, one who follows the path of action should dedicate his thoughts, actions, and speech to the Lord. If one keeps his mind fixed on the Lord, it enables him to give up and offer the fruits of his actions. The aspirant who attains that crosses the mire of delusion through the grace of God. When human endeavor and efforts have been exhausted, then dawns the grace of the descending force of the compassionate Lord of life. But if the aspirant does not follow this path and instead is caught by his egoism, the purpose of his life is not achieved. Verse 1878. Where there is Krishna, the Lord of Yoga, and where there is the bow-bearer, son of Pritha, there glory, victory, success, and polity are definite. This I believe. Swami Rama. The dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna gives deep insight into the philosophy of life and its practical application. These teachings describe the eternal wisdom of the infinite Lord and the ways in which that wisdom can be attained. When a good student has a perfect preceptor, attainment is sure.